Trena Brannon here, sharing techniques and ideas using the new brush alphabet letters and brush word stencils from StencilGirl, designed by me. There are 6 new stencils, 1 alphabet with upper and lowercase letters, and then there's 5 word stencils. Whenever I get new supplies, I get to know my supplies. I build a relationship with it. I don't believe that there's a right or a wrong way to use your supplies. It's all about the desired results you want. My goal is to get to know my supplies well enough to repeat a process to get the desired results that I want. Sometimes I think I messed up and then I discover it's a new technique that I could have never thought of on my own. So what I'm sharing here is in my Strathmore Mixed Media Journal. I just played with the alphabet stencil here on this page, trying different markers and different paint, different pens, just whatever I have in my stash. I like to try to just play with it. So in this case, for example, I used a big brush and then I put a little shadow next to it. Here I use Papermate Inkjoy pens. I would encourage you, when you get something new, you just use whatever you have in your stash already because it may work just fine for you. I've been collecting art supplies for a long time and using it, and so I have quite a bit of different markers. I'm a bit of a marker enthusiast. Quite a bit of markers, pens, pencils. I have metallic pens, so here's an example of where I used a metallic brush pen with the alphabet stencil, and I'll show you also some demos right after this first section where I'm doing an introduction. I'll show you some demos of some of these techniques. Here I put down just some black gesso and then used a Signo gel pen to write the word faith. Here I used just a regular small point pen, a Stabilo, and put in lines, and then I did like an outline of the stencil, and then I just put in lines just for a different look. Here I spaced out, I started at the J, and then I moved the stencil over and wrote the O, and then moved it over further for a Y just to make the word longer. And in the next section I'll show you I'll do a demo of some of these techniques. On this page, I actually put down some of the word stencils just as they were and tried different techniques to see a result. Some things I really like how they came out. Other things I know, oh, well, I won't be doing that. Or it was such a unique outcome that I may use that in a different way. Whereas with words that are sharp, when they come out clear like this, you may have that as a focal point. Something like this you might do as a background, or add some like black with a black pen to refine the word. There's just so many possibilities. I would see art pieces on Instagram or on social media, and I would think, oh wow, look how talented that person is. Perfect faces, perfect colors, just a perfect piece. Then I took a couple classes and learned how to fix boo-boos. It wasn't that their artwork was perfect the first time, they just know how to cover it up, and they were teaching me how to do it. It's almost like cooking. You know, it may not come out exactly right, but you could figure out how to put a spice or some sugar or something in there to make it taste good. You just have to hang in there and work through the ugly. Trust the process and your mojo and keep going. So in the next section, I'll show you some demos using some of these techniques. And at the end of the video, I'll share some finished artwork. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned for the next section. In this section, I'm going to demo how to use the stencils with pens and markers. So let's start with a brush pen, a Tambo marker, and I'm using a Canson Mixed Media Journal. This was a 9x12 and I cut it in half. I got that tip from Mary Beth. So basically what you do is you lay your stencil down, and if you want a crisp image, you want to make sure that you hold the stencil down as you're writing. So I'm going to hold it with my left hand because I'm right-handed, obviously. And then you just fill in the letters. So you just write along as if you were writing the alphabet. And you can go back and fill in if you miss any spots, depending on how big your brush is of your marker. And then you can see it says I made this. You can go back and fill in any openings if you want to, just to give it a finished look. Otherwise, you don't have to. You can leave it the way it is. So let's use something different. We're going to use a Inkjoy gel pen to fill in, and I'm actually going to just fill in the outline just for a different look. So I'm just following along the outer part of the letter, and I'm actually not getting it exact, but I think that's okay. Make sure that you press down and be mindful of the areas that are thin on the stencil. Those are like the little bridges that are very thin that hold the stencil together. Just want to kind of be gentle around those areas. I'm pushing down as I move to the right. Just outlining the letters. And you'll see when I finish, if I missed any pieces, I could just go back and fill in, just like you do when you're working with any other type stencil. Okay, so I'm almost done. Okay, so then what I can do is I can go in and just doodle. I can do crisscrosses, dots, you know, anything you like. For those of you that like to doodle, I can go back, like I said, and fill in if I missed a spot, or I can leave it open. It's really all up to you how you like your letters. And who knows, you might discover a different way to use it if you missed a section. Okay, I missed the dot on this eye, so I'll just put it in, or I could lay the stencil back in. You can also use a different color. In this case, I'll just pick up a black one, a Sharpie pen, to just give a little variance. On the letters. They don't all have to be the same. It just depends on what you want to do. You can even go back and fill in. I could finish the letter or connect the letters together. So that's just to give you an idea when using pens and markers. And then I have some wet markers. So on these, the thing you want to be mindful of is not to have it too wet. And so I'm going to use the alphabet stencil to show you how to connect letters. So let's write the word joy. That's one of my favorite words. So I have a paper towel here. So just to make sure that my marker, this is a Spectrum Noir sparkle marker, is not too wet. So I'm holding down the stencil with my left hand, and I'm just basically filling in the letter. Then I'm going to pick it straight up, and I'm looking for the O. I'm going to lay the O down right next to it, and I can make it connect because I can see through the stencil. And I just fill in the O, and then I'm going for the Y. And I'm pressing down right over the letter, trying not to press down over what where I've already drawn, so that I won't mess that up. And then I pick straight up, and as you can see, it did overflow a little bit, but that's okay. I can just take my marker, my brush pen, and go back over it and just kind of smooth it out. But once I've got my basic letters down there, I can just follow along. Another tip is you can use another marker, like for example, the Sharpie, and go back over, and I'd probably wait a little while for this to dry, and edge it to just give it a different look and to make it more crisp. And when connecting, just think about how you would write in cursive. And then that will help you determine where to outline. Where you cross over. Okay, so those are some examples. And then another one is to use a paint pen. So here again, you want to make sure that it's not too wet. So I'd shake it up and just make sure that I have some paint on there. And then this is a little bit thicker tip, so it fills in pretty complete. But I'm just taking my time, being mindful of those little bridges and filling in the letters. And I pull it straight up, and then I can go in and just finish off some sections. Okay, and then the last one I'd like to show you is on black. So with a white paint pen, this is a Sharpie, this again is a wet media, so you basically want to make sure that it's not too wet, but it has some flow. I just follow along. And I'm going to pull it straight up and just finish off a couple letters. So it's that simple. If you find that some of the paint or ink did spread through the stencil and you want to fix it, there's always white and black pens to help fix things. So once this is dried, what you can do is just go in and put in some black ink. This black ink, you have to make sure it's dry so you don't mess up your tip, but you can just kind of square it off so it cleans it up. So it's not about how good it is the first time that you do something, it's about how well you can clean it up. In this section, I'm going to talk about watercolor techniques. So let's start with like an ombre effect with watercolor pencils. So for this example, I'm using Spectrum Aqua Blend pencils. So I just color the top with green with one color. And just following the lines. It'd be the same thing if you wanted to create your own words with the alphabet set. You just move the letters right next to each other and color the top. And then the bottom, I'm going to color in a blue. Holding down my stencil tight so that it doesn't pop up and I scribble underneath. Unless you want that look, then, you know, feel free to do that. Could be a new technique, a whole new look. Okay, so I get the color in, and then I pull straight up, and then what I like to do, I'm using a brush, actual paint brush, and this is a Velvet Touch, just for your information, a size 4. I have my paper towel so I don't have too much water, and the way that I do it is color one color first and then come back in with the second color. So I'll go all the way across in the green. making my connections as I go, just using the color that's on the brush. And then I rinse it off and come in from the bottom with the second color so they blend. And I'm doing this kind of quickly to keep the video short, but if I wasn't on video, I'd probably do it just a little slower. But the idea is to, you know, blend them where they meet. Okay, so that's one way. Another way to use watercolor is with actual watercolor paint. So this is a lovely dot that I got from Traci Bautista. And so I'm just going to pick up color. There's a couple ways to do it. I'm just going to pick up color and color directly into the stencil. I don't want to have it too wet. And the couple ways is you can outline it and then fill in, or you can just fill in completely. I like to fill in completely because then it's like one swoop. You can also go through the first time with just water and then come back and drop color in. That's another way. And you all can probably think of many other ways. But the whole idea again is just to get inside the stencil, following the letters just like you would if you were writing in cursive. And you can add, you know, add a little bit of water to make it darker. You know, it just depends on how dark you want it and how much you want it to vary in color with each letter. So you can always go back over it. So I'm going to pull straight up. And then what I like to do, you can just go back around and kind of neaten it up if you want. And get that continuity for all the letters by connecting them. Okay, so those are a couple ideas for watercoloring. The next demo I want to show you in this video is to do some baking. And so this is with Seth Apter's Baked Texture, and I'm using Versamark. You can use a pad or the actual Versamarker pen. I use the Versamarker pen when I'm spelling a word. So I'm using the alphabet set, and I'm going to use the larger tip. My tip is a little bit beat up, but it still works. And I'm going to spell bake. So this can be a little tricky because you cannot see, of course, the Versamark. Since mine is beat up and used a lot, it actually has a little bit of color to it. So I can see it, and I had a little bit of water on the stencil, so please excuse that. So I'd put it right next to the B for the A. And it's probably also picking up a little bit of color that was on here from when I used it before. But that doesn't bother me because then it makes it easier for me to see. The only time it bothers me is if I have a dark color and I want to do like a yellow or do a white. So I make sure my stencils are clean. So I'm spelling the word bake. B-A-K-E. And then when I pull up, I'm going to take the other end and just connect. And then the next thing I want to do is sprinkle my embossing powder on. If you have like a static, a little static embossing buddy or whatever you want to call it, you know, those embossing helpers. You may want to use that so that you get a really clean, and off camera I'm just blowing it. You get a really clean print. Then you can use that. I didn't use one here just because I didn't want to spend time. But this is just an example of how you can use the stencils with the baked texture. For ones that have a whole word, you can use the VersaPad by just setting the stencil down and then putting the pad on there. Or you can also use the marker, whatever your preference is. Both work well when you're doing a whole word. For this demo, I'm using some distress inks to show how you can use ink pads and also paint, acrylic paint. So for the application with the inks, the way I like to do it is with a stencil brush. I find that that works really well to get a crisp image. So I just swirl the stencil brush in the distress ink and just gently, not too hard. You don't want to push too hard because, again, with stencils, there could be some little thin bridges that you don't want to get all tangled up in. And then I'm just doing a little bit of a change in color along the way. So I start out light and get a little darker. I just want to swirl it around so I can get color in the stencil itself, so I'm pushing down on the stencil. And so that's the nice results that you get. And so for the paint, what I like to use is for this demo, I'm using a round blending tool and Dylusions paint. And I'm just gonna do it just like Diane does it. Put a little bit off on my little mat here to the side, and then I'm going to push down on the stencil and just swirl it around, trying to get inside the stencil with the blending tool. So I just go all the way across and then lift straight up, and you have a nice impression. And then what you can do with both these is just, for the black, you could just use a black pen to actually fill in the letters to just connect everything. And you can do the same thing with the inks, just using a color marker or a color pencil. In this next video, I'm talking about alcohol inks, that is. I'm using Ranger inks in Pinata, also Ranger alcohol blending solution for this technique. The very first step is to actually lay down your stencil and spread some type of texture paste. I'm using Golden's regular gel semi-gloss for this technique, but you can use any kind of texture paste. You can even use gesso. And each one gives you a different effect. I suggest with all of these, as I mentioned earlier in the first video, with all of these things I'm showing you, use what you have in your stash and see the results and see if that's what you like. To get the results that I'm showing, I'm just showing you the specific tools. So after I've spread the paste and I've let it dry completely, and I don't know if you could see this. This is on Yupo paper. There's the raised letters from the stencil. And I didn't try to connect them on this. I just let them be as they are. So the next thing to do is to put a little blending solution on to start with, and then add just drips of alcohol, and you can add as much or as little as you want depending on the effect that you want and the size of the paper that you're working with. One other thing I want to mention is you want to protect your surface when using alcohol inks because they do stain, and you want to make sure you're working in a well-ventilated area. So crack a window or have a fan, or even paint outside to make sure that you're in an open area. And I also put my card on paper towels. I use a lot of paper towels, and I have this old cutting board that used to be in my kitchen that I use so that I can tilt the colors without getting it on my fingers. You can also use rubber gloves if your skin is sensitive or if you know that you're going to be touching the inks. So I just put down a little blending solution, and then I just drip color and watch the magic happen. And I start out with just a little bit because you can always add. I'm using cool colors for this demo. And then I'm spreading around, and I'm kind of staying in the upper left-hand corner because I have a vision for this paper, and I want to draw something down on the right. So you just kind of play with the inks until you're happy with the results. And you'll see that you get a nice blending effect, and then you'll get a resist with that paste. So the other thing that I like to do is I like to add some metallics in. So I'm going to just drip a little gold in here and just move it around until I'm happy with the results. And sometimes if it's not moving like I want, I'll help it. So you can use a paper towel. You can use a paper towel or some type of Q-tip that I did not have handy. I have to go find to help move the color. You could also use your finger. I've done that, but usually I have on my gloves. So you can see the letters kind of coming through, and I'm going to help them with my Q-tip. And as I said, the whole idea with this technique is you just kind of play with it until you get the results that you like. So I want to make sure that my letters are showing through. And depending on how detailed your stencil is, you'll get a different results because the resist will be closer together. So I'm just going to kind of sweep over the letters and the dots to make sure they show through. Okay, and then I want to put just a little more blending solution around the edges because I want these edges to be just a little softer, some of the hard parts. So I'm going to show this again as a finished project so you can see an example of how I use something like this. But this is a really fun technique to use alcohol inks with your stencil. Thank you so much for watching. Take care and stay positive.